So let's dive in. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with Jeremy Tank, founder of Think Tank Creative. Hey, Jeremy, how you doing? Introduce yourself to our audience and let us know what Think Tank is.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm super thrilled to be sharing everything that Think Tank Creative is and what we do. Primarily, we are focused on brand strategy, branding, marketing, and design to help business owners grow. I mean, isn't that what we all want as business owners, is to grow our business, like get more customers, get more leads, that sort of thing. And our focus around that is really the brand strategy, the branding, the design, the words and the pictures. You're going to hear me say that a lot during this. The words and the pictures that you show to your audience that makes them go, oh, heck yeah, I want that. That's our specialty.
Okay.
And part of the reason I'm talking with you today is because on the backside of that is subconscious reprogramming for business owners.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, any kind of mindset in general topic, mindset, the mind itself, one of my all-time favorite topics. You can go so deep and still only scratch the surface of what we know today. So I'm sure there's so much more that we're going to find out in the next 100 years.
Oh my gosh. The last 5,000 years hasn't seemed to give us quite enough. So I'm not sure even 100 years in the future is going to give us enough to understand this completely.
Right. So tell us a little bit about like, what exactly do you do? How do you go about, like, what's your strategy, what's your system, and how does it all tie into the subconscious reprogramming?
Okay. So big picture is for me is when I'm working with people is figuring out the business strategy, brand strategy sort of thing. So, where do you want to go? I like setting goals at about 3 years because funny thing about the way that the mind works, when we set goals for 5 years, we never quite give ourselves the opportunity to say, yes, we can get that done. Like we'll stack a whole bunch of stuff in there. And the closer we get to that 5-year mark, that we start pulling stuff out and say, oh, that wasn't important in the first place. Forget about that. We set goals for 1 year and we're like, oh, I can do everything. And then we tend to focus on like one tiny corner of it. But in the sweet spot of about 3 years of planning, and I tell business owners, stop doing the annual planning, stop doing the 5-year or 10-year planning. It's good to have those, but if you actually want to be actionable and think about a term, a period where you can set goals, set your KPIs, think about things in a real strategic way and see results, 3 years is like this sweet spot. It's magical in the way our brains work. And just imagine this time, because we can drastically imagine our circumstances changing in 3 years, and we can take the actions to implement that change in 3 years. And 1 in 5 just doesn't seem to do that. So it's just a magical sweet spot. And then from there, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's kind of related to everything, even when it comes to, hey, I'm going to clean the house today. I'm going to set aside the entire day to clean the house, or 10 hours or whatever. And you end up just, I did a couple things. That's not important. I'm not going to clean that room. But if you'll, the reverse side of that, I'm going to clean the entire house in an hour. You're not going to get that done. You're going to hyper focus on one room or one area, but you're not going to clean the entire house. But 3 hours,
I was going to say, if you set a time limit around that, or you say, I'm going to clean these 2 rooms, all of a sudden it becomes much more approachable for the brain to imagine it and then carry out those specific tasks. It's just limiting the focus. And so much of mindset, so much of business, so much of life is, where is your focus? Where is your energy going? Where is, everything has to do with training your mind to a certain point and then taking the steps down that road.
Right. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the saying, where focus goes, energy flows?
Absolutely. And it's funny, my wife is a doctor of Chinese medicine, and in their medicine, which is, over 5,000 years old, where focus goes, chi goes. Chi is like the energy of the body.
Right.
So,
right.
There's a lot of tie-in with some of that older stuff.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So let's, if you will, let's dive into this a little bit
Yeah.
more. Let's go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, let's do it. So let me get from where we just were to diving down this rabbit hole, because where I help people a lot is, we think about that long-term vision. Long-term, 3 years is not that long to me. Um,
Right.
and then I help them create the words and the pictures, websites, logos, marketing, social media, all that kind of stuff. I found after doing that for 25 years that the business owners can be super successful in life and still feel like they're not hitting it, still feel like things aren't there for them, still feel like they're not successful, or that they're just faking it, that imposter syndrome thing. So I actually
Totally.
went back and got trained on how to do this subconscious reprogramming so that I can give some support to people who are in this, create what you want in the vision, create all the pieces, and then, hey, support you mentally on the back end. Subconscious
And
reprogramming.
don't quote me on this because I'm not sure, and this is a very touchy subject, but a good majority, maybe not majority, but a good percentage of suicide victims are very rich.
Yeah. Just because you're wealthy does not mean that you're happy.
Right.
And a lot of what our system of life has taught us is pursue the wealth, pursue, what other people judge as success, and keep competing against everybody else. Meanwhile, we have an epidemic of depression that is frankly global.
Right.
And we're reaching those same levels of anxiety that trigger the same sort of stuff.
Right.
It's
It's
it's it's so sad.
it is. It really is. But that's why we have people like you who, you said you just went back to get trained on how you can, really, really dive in and say, okay, you're killing it in your business, you're killing it all around you, but you still
Yeah.
seem unhappy. Where's the issue? Let's get down to the root cause of that. So take us through that journey.
Uh, you mean with an individual, if I were walking through some of that, or
I
just
just mean like you're saying for 25 years you were doing this, and then you kind of were noticing this pattern of people still weren't happy. So you went back and
oh
and
yeah. Uh, uh, okay, so I actually have to manage my own emotions here when I
oh
start to talk about
okay.
this. So that's why I'm just taking a moment here, because I launched Think Tank Creative in 2017. I went full time in 2018 and had a great roster of clients all the way through basically the start of the pandemic. And I was creating a bunch of stuff for them, feeling really good actually. Only I noticed that their businesses weren't doing what we were talking about. We would talk about, okay, great, now do a social media campaign, now let's put
Right.
out some video, now let's go ahead and you should be at a point in about 3 months where you're buying Facebook ads and kind of leveraging all of that kind of stuff, and they just weren't hitting it. And I wasn't doing what I call brand coaching at that point, and the brand coaching is where we're doing some of this subconscious reprogramming, and it's called magnetic mind like setting, because magnet and you go right to it.
Right.
Uh, and so I'd sit down and talk with them, and they go, I'm just unhappy. I'm stressed. I can't focus. I can't do all of these things. And I went, wow, okay, I get it, but I don't get it really. So I'm here as, your brand guy when you need me.
Right.
And then
Right.
right. And then the pandemic hit. And I'd say a greater part of 90% of my clients just disappeared. Like they couldn't handle it. The change was too much. The shutdown for a couple of weeks closed them out. Some of them lost real estate deals that were in high number real estate deals.
Wow.
And yeah, it was tragic. And at that time I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to kind of take a break. I'm not going to push on anybody super hard. I need some time for myself. Maybe it's a good time to take it. Right.
Right.
And my mother passed away in 2017, the same year I got my master's degree, the same year I was working a full-time job, the same year I launched Think Tank Creative. And I'll be honest, I did not process any of that until the pandemic hit. And
I
that was
can
the point
imagine.
when, yeah, that was the point where sitting there with kind of deciding to lay back from the business a little bit and let things just settle and see where they landed. I fell into a deep depression because it just I suddenly 3 years later, I suddenly realized my mom's not around anymore. And it was so weird to me because I'm like, I'm an adult and there's no reason that this should impact me. I'm doing all the things, I'm moving forward, but it did impact me. It impacted me in a deep way where I didn't feel supported. I didn't feel like I was doing something worthy of contributing to the world. I started to get really fuzzy in all of my thinking. I actually started to have that phenomenon that some people say, you know, these angry voices inside, or these sad voices, or the criticizing voices, the judging voices. I've never really experienced that. And I suddenly started to have a lot of that creeping in. So I did what I've always done. I started reading a ton of books. And and by that, I mean like Siddhartha. I mean, stuff by Alan Watts, like real esoteric kind of spiritual stuff to try and find focus. And it was at this point that I said, you know what? I need something to actually, I think I get that I'm not using the stuff between my ears right. Something's not quite right with the programming there. What do I need to fix this? And I found a program out of Europe that was still going. It was all online. It was called Rapid Transformation Therapy, RTT. And RTT is sort of a combination of psychotherapy, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, cognitive behavioral therapy, some childhood therapies, and it all mixes it together with hypnotherapy in a way that really gets to subconscious roots of trauma and works through them using all of these tools in an integrated net.
Okay.
And it's fantastic.
And not to jump ahead here, but are we talking about like the hypnotherapy? That's like the when you put in what is that, theta brainwaves or the
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, when you're born until about the age of 7, your brain is going in these really slow, steady frequencies. And what I mean frequencies, what I mean is it's almost as if you're getting a flow of information from the front of your head to your back of your head. And it's very regular. It's very rhythmic. It's very relaxing. And that's the reason children have this frequency. It is literally programming them how to fit into society by, oh gosh, that theta frequency is like a sponge. It's just open and absorbing and welcoming, and it reaches them on deep levels, the stuff that we as adults, it falls right off of us. We don't even recognize it. But in kids, the smallest thing sticks in there, and it can stick in there for years and years and years.
Right. So
hypnotherapy, hypnosis in particular, actually brings people back down to that theta brainwave frequency. In everyday life, we're in what's called a beta or a high beta, which is just like back and forth and sometimes disjointed and all over the place. And as you start to relax and go into like a meditative state or a calm state, we go into an alpha frequency, which is just a little bit slower than that. And then the theta is even slower than that. It's very rhythmic. You also experience that between 3 to 5 minutes after you wake up, and probably 5 to 10 minutes before you go to sleep.
Right.
Which coincides with a lot of the times people say, write positive affirmations for yourself and read them just after you wake up and just before you go to sleep. So everybody really, this is what we're talking about, is getting to the point where your brain locks onto these signals, locks onto it subconsciously, and just starts enacting it for you, because that's the stuff that you really want.
Right. Right. And a big issue that I see with a lot of people, you probably see this as well, the future has not happened yet. Therefore, the future, we'll say, doesn't exist to an extent.
Yeah.
And yet so many people play out the future, and they work themselves up. They play this negative story. And it's like, well, if you're already playing a negative story about your future, how do you think it's actually going to be once you get there? Like once you come, or that time passes, it's probably going to suck. Like if now take that and only envision the best possibilities. I mean, obviously, maybe nothing too crazy to where you can't actually, your mind actually can't believe that you'll be able to do that. But
Why
if you're
not?
okay, sure,
Hey,
sure.
hey, I'm in the camp of why not? Like, if dreaming is essentially the same thing. Your brain is presenting you information that logically you think that can't be. I can't possibly be flying, and yet in a dream, you're flying. Or
Yeah.
you can be
Yeah.
flying, and it's fantastic. And some people who are doing the lucid dreaming stuff, they stay in it, they experience it, and it is full sensation of them going through that. So in my mind, why not? And actually, the more I read into quantum science, the more I'm like, I'm absolutely going to start thinking about that stuff. I'm absolutely going to start thinking about the positive and even impossible things, because the more that you lock onto that stuff, the more that you think about it. They say it takes about 17 seconds in a single thought, 17 seconds to create a cohesive, spooky action at a distance. That's what Einstein called that, when two
Okay.
particles become entangled with each other. And the idea is, it's not entangled in time, it's not entangled in space, but there's something affecting something else completely disconnected. Well, that's what we do every time we close our eyes and think of things. We force our brain to process something.
Right.
And in the case of that, we're affecting everything around us by the energy, by the thoughts, by the images. And that becomes, according to quantum science, entangled with the world around us. So why not think of the best stuff? Why not think of impossible things that are amazing, that, great, I want to be I want to be on a stage speaking to 600 people. That right now, that seems impossible to me. But you know what? I'm going to throw it out there because it could absolutely happen.
Right.
I don't know
Right.
the timing, but why not?
Yeah. And I mean, so yeah, so something like that doesn't seem, I mean, yes, like you said, at the moment, at your current state in life, that might seem kind of crazy, but something like that is tangible. It doesn't actually, in the long term, I mean, you might not know when it's going to happen, but it's very, very doable, very possible. So I think it's very I think it's appropriate to say that 90% of the people are setting themselves up for failure by getting in their head and playing these negative stories. And then they
So
wonder
many
why
people.
their life isn't what they thought it would be or dreamed it would be when they were younger. And it's just a cycle that goes on and on.
Well, and at that point, we actually bring into the idea of, okay, let's talk about generational trauma. Let's talk about, and I don't even want to get into like abuse or anything like that, but just generational trauma in terms of, you have these thoughts that when you get anxious, when you get stressed, I'm saying you, but I don't mean you, Mike.
Right. Right.
Um, we all kind of have these stress responses, and these stress responses are built on what we have experienced as children or as a young adults, or something that is really explosively emotional. Those impactful experiences to us, that they can be positive or negative, but that huge emotion in us actually is what creates a memory. I mean, like, a memory is just all of the senses that we have locked in with an emotional component that gets released and kind of stored and processed by our body. And
Right.
that's why when we tend to have really good memories or really bad memories, it's tied in with a lot of emotion, because that's what triggers keeping an emotion. That's what triggers our memory, our brain, our mind, to actually build this cascade of experiences that make us who we are. Now, some of those are from our childhood. Some of those are
Right.
from our parents when they were treating us, as our childhood, which is what they got treated as children, which is what their parents got treated as children. It just keeps getting handed down. And, it's up to a lot of us as we become more conscious and aware, in a greater societal impact of, okay, what I'm experiencing, the stress, the anxiety, the negative thinking, isn't actually me.
Right.
Point one, it's not actually me. There are so many people I meet that they believe that's them. And they can't distinguish that you can think positively, you can speak positively to yourself. That negative voice doesn't have to be you. That's
Right.
they're trained to believe that that's not a choice, that it is just the way it is. And in fact, I've met several people, and I've worked with several people where they say, excuse me, no, I am negative. Like, I have to be negative. That is what motivates me. That is the part of me that tells me I need to keep going, or I need to do better, or I need to try harder, or I need to push harder, or I need to you name it. And they use that as an excuse. And I say, okay, yeah, but I understand. Has it helped you succeed? Yes. Has it helped you feel good while succeeding? Well, no. Okay, that's the problem. That's the line we want to draw. Because if you are going through this experience and succeeding, that's fantastic. That's great. You're going to be celebrated by, 80% of society right there. Yay, they made money. Hooray. If you're going to go through it at the end of the day, say, yeah, I made $30 million last year, and I want to kill myself. That doesn't seem actually successful.
That there was this is going back a few years. I believe he was a Russian man. He was a billionaire, and he had something like $700 billion or something like that, and he lost 300 billion. I mean, he still had a ton of money, and he went and killed himself.
It's perspective. It's all perspective. It's how you see it. You said it earlier, the story that goes on, right? Well, if I lost half of my wealth and I had $10, I've got $5.
Right.
I can think that's awful and horrible, or I can go, okay, great. Now I want to make more money. Right. It doesn't matter the sum. When you lose a percentage of it, it feels bad. And people, God, there's been a couple of studies on this. People will work harder to keep the money that they have rather than like losing some, even if they have a promise of more money on the back end. Like, we
That's
have the
why
greater
people don't invest. That people have to break out of a mindset to be able to invest.
Okay, so you used the magic word here, and you've said it a couple times now.
So yeah, and the mindset word right there.
Right, and I know you love mindset, and that's awesome. But we need to kind of come up with, at least between you and me and the listeners, like, what is mindset? Because I have way too many conversations of people going, well, no, this is mindset, or this is mindset, or this is it. And so just for me and the audience, what is mindset to you?
Mindset to me is what I would call mindset is the story that you play in your head, that you tell yourself of who you are and everything around you, what your life is. And that being said, I absolutely believe that at any given moment, you can change it. You can change your entire reality, who you are, what you do, by changing that mindset, by changing that story that you tell yourself. As a quote, Jordan Belfort here. Great. Now I'm gonna butcher it, but basically, the only thing standing between you and your goals or your dreams or fill in the blank, whatever that is for you, is the bullshit story that you tell yourself of why you can't achieve it.
Yeah, I love that. Even if it was a loose paraphrase, I love it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that explanation. So basically, it's like the story that you keep hearing over and over of what you can and can't do. Does that sound right? Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's fantastic, because that story is based on, I mean, from what I've learned and how I utilize this, it's based on how you were raised, the things that you were taught, the way you experienced life, your first love, your first heartbreak. I love thinking about all those kinds of things, because those are really moments that shape us. How did we rebound from that? Did you go, okay, well, that hurt, and now I'm going to get up and go back to work and go back and do my things? Or are you one of those people that said, ow, that really hurt, and then you play Metallica for a week straight and never get out of bed? It works both ways. And mindset really, so there's a part of the way that the mind processes, and it's called the reticular activating system, or the RAS. and you nod, so you may know this one.
Yes.
The RAS is sort of like the filter of what we experience, because in any given moment, you are experiencing the thoughts of that moment, the feelings of that moment, all of the senses, sight, touch, taste, smell, as well as all of the feedback coming from your body, from all the places, they talk about these days, they basically have discovered we have 3 brains, right? We have this brain, we've got the heart brain, because there's neurons that send more signals to the brain than actually from the brain to the heart. And then there's the gut brain, which has to do a lot with our personal bacteria and flora and all those sort of things that seem to respond. All of that stuff is sending signals up into our head. So in every moment, we're sort of parsing through all of that information. And the reticular activating system is the one that's sort of going, okay, wait, guys. Okay, we've got 10,000 signals here. Which ones are important? And this is where our values, this is where we actually, like, our goals, our values, our vision, this is where this actually comes into play, because that's what tells the reticular activating system, okay, wait, too much, 40 things. Let's call it 40. Right this moment, choose the best 40 things, and that is what you are going to experience. And so that's what you feel in that moment, those 40 things. And then the very next second, the brain goes, okay, what's next? Do we still have those 40? Do we want to shift to something else? How important is it? And the whole brain functions off of contrast. The whole brain is going, okay, from moment to moment, what has changed in all of that sense of perception? Because the brain is looking for safety. It's looking for security. Those are the basic instincts, the hippocampus instincts, the reptile brain, reproduction, food, security. Are we being chased? Is there a tiger? Whatever is around us. So it's comparing moment to moment, looking for a change in anything around us. And then after it senses a change, is it familiar? Is it unfamiliar? If it's familiar, great. Let's towards that, because that's more likely to be safe than something that's unfamiliar. All of these things train us to kind of limit ourselves, to step back and say, okay, let's stay safe. Let's stay, one of my clients said, I just want to be sane. I just want to be sane. And I said, well, what does that even mean? Like, you're using someone else's idea of what that doesn't mean. You are interfacing with the world. According to quantum science, again, physics, there isn't actually an objective reality. It's all subjective. And we are influencing and seeing each other through basically, oh gosh, we're just bouncing off of each other like a bunch of super balls stuck in a crate. That's all that's happening. So, if you're experiencing something that's really hard, that doesn't make you insane. That doesn't make you wrong. That doesn't make you crazy. That means you're experiencing a lot of stuff. And maybe your sympathetic nervous system is just shot all to hell, and it's just rebounding with all of these fight or flight responses. And, maybe we can look in your past and see why, and kind of train your body to this subconscious programming stuff to say, okay, look, I have phenomenal coping skills. I can get through anything. And I remember he looked at me and went, okay, let's do that, because I want to have phenomenal coping skills. But there's so much that we are trained in. It's that fight or flight triggers, and it's sympathetic nervous system. And, when you look at, when I was growing up, it was fight or flight. Nowadays, we have fight, flight, fawn, and freeze, which in any given situation pretty much describes every behavior that I see.
Right.
And I don't know, my reasoning for that is that our brains are lazy. Our brains, don't want to burn the calories to experience something new or to look. And until we learn it, until we experience it, it's easier just to shut it off and have this fight or flight response that pushes it away from us. And in that way, really, we're just, again, leveraging survival, leveraging, what keeps us, quote unquote, safe. But we don't thrive that way. We thrive when we push our boundaries and keep experiencing and keep learning.
Right. And this is, well, I'm going to interject here. I don't know if it's the proper time to do it.
Please.
like you were saying, we don't thrive there because what we thrive when we're pushing our boundaries. And that comes back to the way that the mind was explained to me. I think we talked about this on our the last call that we had, is that, you given all of, the everything that makes up your mindset now, even if it's not because of you, maybe it's your parents or like generational, you are stuck here. You start out here with your mindset. And the way it was explained is, imagine a rubber band, a big rubber band around your mind. And that's keeping you in there. So if you're trying, especially in entrepreneurship, you get into entrepreneurship and they say that's why 90% or whatever the percentage here is, I know it's very high, businesses fail within the first year. They can't make it out of the first year. But if you do make it out of the first year, you are most likely going to succeed. And the reason why is because, you're here and you're bouncing off the rubber band trying to, I want to do this, and you're just getting snapped back because you're not doing enough consistent action, taking enough consistent action that gets you out of your comfort zone. That eventually, if you do that over and over and over again, you're doing things that scare you. It's not going to harm you. It's not going to kill you, but it scares you because your brain's like, whoa, hold on. We don't know what this is. You're stretching that rubber band, stretching, and eventually you snap it. And now you're on a new level. Now you can function at a higher level, and you keep going.
Yeah. So there's an idea in polyvagal theory, and polyvagal theory has to do with the vagus nerve and the fight or flight response. And it's all about, there's two different branches of the vagus nerve. There's the dorsal vagus nerve, which runs up the back of us. And there's the ventral vagus nerve, which runs up the front of us. And us, I mean, just like our spines. And the ventral vagus nerve connects to the prefrontal cortex in the front of our brains, which is like our planning, our logic, our forecasting. It also happens to be the seat of like our social contracts and how we respond to one another. And one of the ideas is that when we start to fawn, it's actually that vagus nerve kind of clamping down a little bit and the brain going, wait, I want to connect socially to see if I can fix this. I don't want anything to go wrong. And the freeze response, of course, is when the dorsal vagus nerve just goes, you're done, cut it off, you just faint, just like the fainting goats. They go down. When we're very young, even before we're born, we're triggering these reflexes because this is how we learn. This is how we experience the world and learn. And what happens is that if you can kind of imagine a cone that's very small at first, and then it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Your homeostatic range, the range where you feel comfortable, where things are safe and stable, kind of bounces back and forth within that cone. So as you get older, you experience more things. You understand that you can survive it. You understand that you can stretch, that you're not going to die. It's not going to be a total survival thing. And so you expand your range even more. And it's just like that rubber band that you're talking about. The more that you experience, the more that you realize, oh, I can do this. Again, it helps if you have that story in your head. I can do this. I can accomplish anything. I can sit through anything. All I need to do is sit through another. I love to use the one, I just need to be here for another 5 minutes. I give it 5 minutes, whatever it is. I just need to do 5 minutes. If I can do 5 minutes and I get through that, I look at my clock, I go, can I give it another 5? Or do I really need to cut and run? Like, how is it actually affecting me? Okay. And I use the trick of, this is easy, this is fun, and this is simple. And I actually kind of repeat that to myself when I'm in some of those stress situations. This is fun, this is easy, this is simple. And again, if you tell yourself that for 17 seconds, it sort of resets. I don't know if it's the reticular activating system or just the self-perception, the ego of how we are addressing the situation we're afraid of. And it can actually expand that homeostatic range incredibly until you learn none of this, pardon me, none of this freaking matters.
Right.
None of it. I just want to be here and do my thing and share and be and live and all of that. That's the point that you break through. That's the point where you're like, okay, next level, man. What else you got for me?
So I want to say, and you were cutting out a little bit there, and then it kind of sped up afterwards. So if I don't know how long you were waiting for me to catch up, but something that like just really resonated with me, for some reason, really stuck with me. There was an interview, or sorry, there was someone a news team at the Olympics, and they were going around and they were asking each Olympian, how do you prepare for this event? How do you do this, that, and the other thing? And she asked every one of them the same question: are you nervous? How do you feel? Are you nervous? And they're like, no, I'm not nervous. She's like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm excited.
I did.
And you're like, well, hold on a minute. It's the exact same feeling with a different way of looking at it. And that just stuck with me.
Yeah. So there were some great studies done in Russia. You know, I know I don't want to talk about Russia or anything like that right now, but they did some great studies in the 70s, 80s, early 90s that were really all about mentally training their athletes, mentally training scientists, mentally training workers with things just like that, recognizing that the feeling in the body is a feeling, but how you're trained to recognize that and what labels you apply to that radically shift your performance in every regard. Your brain works faster, your body works better, more efficient, and you can actually push yourself. And it's part of the key to that mind over body sort of thing. It really is. Well, Alan Watts, in one of his books, says, you know, everything is a metaphor. Everything you're experiencing, everything you're talking about, and anything that you are describing is because somebody else used that word or that image or that something to describe it to you. You learned it from someone. And going back, everything is just a metaphor. So that's the reason words like mindset get me a little bit. And I'm like, where are you on that? You know, what does that actually mean? What is the subconscious mind? What is happiness? What is sadness? How do you know that you are actually, and I know that that sounds kind of funny, but I've been talking with people that they know they're hungry because they get angry. They know that they're hungry because they get tired. They know that they're hungry because of these emotional reactions, but they've also learned to ignore the physical symptoms of hunger.
Right.
How are you interfacing with your body? How have you learned to be? What are those words actually describing that? Using excitement instead of nervous is a fantastic trick that my mom actually started teaching me when I was probably in middle school.
Yeah. And I can imagine it's had a great, you know, okay, so go back to when you were in middle school. Had she not had taught you that, are there very key points in your life that stand out that would have gone completely differently had you not learned that?
Oh, crap. Just in middle school, I never would have danced with Carrie Cameron had that not happened. Never. I probably would not have pursued the career that I did had I not had that. I graduated valedictorian from high school. I probably would have not gotten up and given a speech if I hadn't had that. Like everything is just looking at it as an opportunity to be excited and fulfilled. And afterwards, I mean, I could think like afterwards, it's like, woo, it's done. And I feel great. And I don't even care if I messed up. Nope, just let it go. It's done. You can't change it, so let it go.
Right. And I think that's something that, you know, people they do get I guess out of their comfort zone, but then they struggle with that follow-up to where, oh no, I looked like an idiot, or oh, I sound like, and then they get stuck there. And it's like you have to just learn, just let it go. It's done. You can't change it. It happened. So
how many sayings do we have that are essentially that? Let it be, let it go. Such is life, c'est la vie. Every language, every culture has saying, yep, that was that, this is this. So let's keep going. It's kind of funny, but we ignore a lot of it. It just becomes words, it becomes noise until the point that your brain is ready to accept it. Your mind is ready to accept it in a new way. And when I was getting trained in this RTT stuff, they said, you know, the your mind only knows what it knows when it knows it. And we can obviously go, well, yeah, of course, when I'm 6, I'm 6. So I can't know what somebody who is 30 would know.
Right.
Right. So, but so many of these things, like I know that I listened to Let It Be as a kid. You know, my dad liked Beatles. So, you know, let it be, let it be.
Right.
Like, yeah, and it was just a song. It was just nonsense. It was just words. It was just a melody. Now as an adult, I'm like, wow, that is so deep. Holy cow.
Right. I wonder, so I was thinking about this earlier today. So I have a 3-month-old son, and I'm holding him and I'm talking to him, and I'm just wondering how much, preparing for this podcast, knowing that we're going to be talking about this stuff. And I'm thinking, I wonder how much of this I'm sure he's retaining all of it, but I wonder how much he's going to remember, how much as he grows up, it's going to affect him in certain ways. And then it got me thinking, I wonder how many, or I wonder what has structured me from my parents, from my childhood, from things the TV was on, or the song was playing, something that I've abstracted from there, just anything around me that has kind of stuck with me and not even realizing where it came from or why I do certain things. And it's just, when you stop and think about that, you're like, whoa, hold on a minute. Oh, wow. We're getting really deep here. So.
Right. But, you know, humans, um, when humans come out, we're not fully cooked.
Right.
It takes years. And, you know, unlike horses or elephants, where it's like, okay, they pop out, they stand up, they, you know, mom ushers them over, okay, have some straw, some hay, whatever. You know, humans, they come out, and 3 years is about the point that they start recognizing the world and objects and things and being able to respond. And that's a fun time. Oh, that is a really fun time, because you start to see the recognition, right?
Right.
You start to see when things are touching base, and oh, this means that. It's a connection of you know, I said the brain processes moment to moment, and it's all the sensory stuff coming in. Well, from like 2 to 7 is when that whole sequential process, and I think of it, Buddhism has a really good way, and Taoism is a good way of saying it. Look, it's the river. You know, there's the beginning, the end, and you're just sort of somewhere in the middle, kind of choosing your path, you know, to either shore, but it just keeps going. That is our sensation. That is our being, our consciousness, the way that the mind processes our reality. And right between 2 and 7 is really, wow, where the mind starts going, oh, this and then that. Holy cow.
Right.
And I love watching that. It is so exciting to see lights go on for little kids, because it is some of those things starting to connect. It's the neural networks that are starting to bridge and gap and close and create what will become personality in, you know, just a couple of years.
Right. And I mean, that's honestly, I think that's the best part. I mean, you know, being a parent, you're like, oh, this baby, this is the best part. And then as they get a little older, no, this is the best. But I think overall, watching that change, watching them realize and start interacting with the world, and seeing that connections that they're making, it's just so, there's something about it. It's very beautiful as well, because it's so innocent. It's like they're just, oh, this is how things work. It's like, I wish I could go back and learn all the right things right out of the gate.
Well, but see, you're in the perfect opportunity for that right now, because you are experiencing life through your kid. You are
Right.
literally experiencing what they are experiencing. So it's your opportunity to say, you know, I don't want them to feel a world without my presence, without my love, without my support, without my caring. How can I be present for them? You know, what did I receive or not receive? How can I show up differently for them to help them be successful for themselves in their life.
Right.
There's a Marissa Peer has this saying that children don't come from you, they come through you.
Okay.
And it's just sort of like all of these experiences that you're bringing to them and doing is forming who they will become, and everything. It's just it's a nuclear explosion of coolness,
Right.
because it's just like their mind is blown, and it's just all you can do is support and love and give and offer as they experience. And it's the worst you can do is start closing things off or shutting down, because it that's what teaches them, you have to be distant, or you have to not be. We don't want that actually closes off the world. That leads us back into a place and a world and a time that things get darker. We want to
Right.
keep offering support and love and openness as much as possible, because that's where you are in your life and where I am in my life and the people I work with. It's like, we don't want to be closed. We want to be open so that we feel confident and strong enough to face these challenges, to face the things that we fear. When we start marching into the things that we fear, that's when we start stretching those rubber bands. That's when we start, really building the mindsets and the resilience to take any next step that's presented to us. So you're in a
Right.
fabulous place because you get to examine yourself for your kid.
Right. And there's so many moments where I'm holding them on my lap and I'm working, or even just listening to a podcast or a video with all this valuable information that I'm gaining from it. And then I'm take a second to, oh, that's probably going in there. This kid's going to be a genius
Oh,
by
it
the time.
definitely is.
Yeah.
It definitely is. And that is awesome. That is awesome, because that's stuff that's going to go in there and just be stuck. When I was 4 and 5 and 6, my mom was part of like this little metaphysical community in Phoenix.
Okay.
So I grew up around people who were doing like channeling and tarot card reading and energy work and frequencies and aura cleaning and all this. And, I'm not really part of that community now, but I dig it. And there's a lot of it that's just, it has a very almost maternal home-like feel when I talk to people who believe in that. I'm like, yeah, cool, man. Right
Yeah.
on.
Taking me back. Like, yeah. Right.
Yeah. And that is stuff that isn't in my logical brain. That's not in my conscious brain. That's like deep in me, because we spent time doing it and listening to it and experiencing it. It affects you. It all
Right.
affects you. And it's awesome.
So taking a turn from the positive here to maybe a little bit more negative, but just kind of analyzing the situation that me and my wife talk about this all the time. We realize that I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it seems to be a generational thing, but it could just be every generation at a certain point in time that we've noticed that everyone likes looking back at a certain point. So for example, my wife is the youngest of 10 kids. So her older siblings or medium, middle siblings, they're at a point now in their life to where we sit around at a picnic or, a barbecue, and all their stories are talking about, remember when? And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I have stories where I say, remember when we did that? That was fun, or that, a funny story here and there. But I'm always looking ahead. For 99% of the time, did you know about this? I'm trying to get here. Whereas so many people are like, hey, remember when, that was the greatest time now. And it implies them saying, my life sucks now. And there's nothing to look forward to. Where does that come from? Is it generational, or is it just people who are stuck in that mindset that they grew up with, that they never had the chance to break out of and explore? Where does that really come from?
Okay. So I've got 2 different answers here that are going to go into this, but I'm going to try to remember both of them so I can touch on both of them before it gets out of the flow. The first part of that is you find a lot of that when you reach, for lack of a better term, your community. Simon Sinek, in one of his books, says, community is people who think and act like you. And Seth Godin's like, look, you want to find your community. This is, he's all about your community. You find your tribe, your people. These are the people that think and act and believe just like you. Family is the first community. And you can grow up in hating them, but when you grow up in a big family like that, my mom had 4 other brothers and sisters plus the parents. So I considered that a big family. Your wife has a big family. That's awesome. But that means that they have dynamics of a community, basically a small town. And that means that when they get together, they resonate on, now I'm going to say the word frequency here. And by frequency, I don't really mean like woo-woo frequency. What I mean is like brain frequency. There's entrainment, there's mirror neurons that pick up what other people are thinking or feeling or doing. And when you grow up in a family like that, that stuff is super strong. And whoever is the attention seeker, the domineering one, the parent, whoever's the alpha in that group, like they tend to set different feelings, different ideas out. And they're doing it completely unconsciously, really, for the most part. I mean, some people don't, but it's really unconscious. And when you get into that, jumping into nostalgia, super easy. Because when you're around the family, when you're around all those people, then it's immediately like, okay, the brain, the way that it creates our current moment is through collages of memories that coincide with whatever's happening now. So it has to, again, you're experiencing this 10,000 sensory inputs, from the body, the mind, the emotions, all that stuff, whatever's going on now in your reticular activating system says, okay, wait, 40 things. Let's just narrow it down, 40 things to concentrate on. When you're with your family or a community, safety kind of goes to the bottom of that list. But ideas, concepts, memories, feelings from before start getting prioritized because survival instinct kicks in just a little bit, and we literally start remembering the way things used to be, so that it engages our community and bonds us even more, so that the brain goes, we are safe. They're thinking and acting and remembering just like me. They believe just like me. I am part of this family, part of this community. I am safe. So it's triggering the nostalgia response because it's a way to feel safe and secure. It's part of that family dynamic. And we can absolutely accept that and say, okay, well, it's harmless, especially in an instance like that, because, that is really reinforcing the familial feel. It's great. The flip side of that is when we can't move past that, when that is all that we have. And that is triggering, when the brain worries about the future, it causes anxiety because we want to think through every instance that could go wrong to prevent it. When the brain is thinking about the past, it triggers depression because we start comparing the past to the present and going, oh, it wasn't as good as that. Oh, this seemed so great, because you idolize the things that were in the past, whether they were great or not, really. And unless you choose to flip that, it's that comparison thing again. For the brain really functions on contrast and comparison. So if you get stuck in that, constantly remembering the past, you're just judging, you're creating this desire for something that's not there, which creates suffering inside. Again, I'm going to pull a little bit of Buddhism in here. Like, that suffering starts building up because it isn't what it used to be. And it isn't, you're right. It's sort of telling our body, our brains, look how good it used to be. You kind of suck now.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that's,
and it,
just go ahead.
I was going to say, it takes effort to overcome that. We understand through the study of neuroplasticity that some of that is neuron networks. Some of that is neuron networks that are maintained long-term to keep safe, to keep secure, and to keep that relationship, that community going, because that means safety in a big regard. We understand through neuroplasticity that those networks change and shift over time, and that never stops from the point that we're born, before we're born, okay, all the way to when we die. And I'm honestly convinced that some of those networks are still shifting after we die, because that is a chemical response to stimulations going on. And even after we die, the body is processing tons of chemical responses.
Right.
But it takes the brain 21 days to build a new neuroplastic network. And that includes the initial experience that bonds new neurons together, and then reinforcing that. Dr. Dispenza says that neurons that fire together wire together. Well, it takes 21 days to wire these things together. And when I'm doing the subconscious reprogramming, we go through, it's usually a 2 or 3 hour session digging into a lot of these memories, a lot of these emotions. And a lot of them have to do with young childhood, because of the associations we built, the feelings that we felt, what we knew at the time, so that we can look at that and go, okay, as an adult, you were 3 when you experienced that. Now, as a 25-year-old, as a 36-year-old, as a 48-year-old, do you still think that that's true? Well, no, of course not. You were 3 at the time. You just didn't have the world experience to know that. Now, as an adult, we can go, okay, great. Now it's changed. So by combining the adult knowledge with the way that we kind of experience that 3-year-old through the subconscious programming, what we're doing is actually joining, I can't prove this because I haven't done fMRIs with this, but we're joining neural networks. We're saying, okay, when this thing that previously fires is now going to be attached to this whole other thought of what I know now, what I've experienced now, the emotions that I have now, and we're actually combining physically these neural networks. And then I have people listen to the recording of that session over 21 days. And I say, do it for 30 days. And, it's good if you do it once a day in the morning. It's great if you do it in the morning, in the evening. Again, I'm hitting those theta brainwave frequencies, and I'm binding those neural networks together with neuroplasticity over time to shift the way it was into the way we want it to be.
Right. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but someone that might not even be open to that idea, like maybe they don't buy into it. Maybe they're going to be like, well, that won't work for me. Okay. A good question then for you. Someone that comes into this program, works with you with I don't know if someone would actually be there if they thought this way, but if they came into it to kind of prove it wrong and say, I don't think this is going to work for me, will they get the actual response, or will they kind of block it out?
So some people are more difficult to get down into a relaxed and accepting state. And whether they believe it or not, I know this sounds crass, but I don't care. I don't, because the way that I'm looking at this, the way that I approach everything, like I'm talking very animated with you. And this is kind of how I am when I'm talking with clients and with people in general. But when I start doing this work, I'm very calm. The voice changes. It's like the late night DJ voice, it's just easing into the whole
Chris
thing.
Voss, are you familiar? Yeah. His negotiation skills comes from how he can speak in that. Yeah.
But that's what he's doing, is he's triggering the same sort of hypnotic response. And when he tells, like, that book is great because it says, use emotions, make other people think. It's actually triggering responses in the brain that are almost hypnotic, bouncing back and forth between logic and emotion. And it's creating, if logic is here and emotion is here, this bouncing back and forth is sort of like that theta frequency thing. It's slowing down the brain. It's forcing. When you add that DJ voice in, it is sort of getting the person in a hypnotic state. And when you do that, there's a part, okay, so I'm throwing a lot of references at you, and you don't have to know a lot of them, but I feel like your audience is going to be looking up books like crazy at this point.
Yeah.
And that's good, in my opinion. So there's this idea called parts theory that has to do with, as we experience things in life, we are actually sort of diving in and out based on the traumas and the learning that we go through, diving in and out of slightly different aspects of ourselves. So, if you as a total being are like, I am digits 1 through 10, awesome. Then, maybe when you're stressed, you're 1 through 4. And maybe when
Right.
you're happy, you're 3 through 6. Like there's just, it's a mix of these pieces. And it has to do with, again, those neural networks and how they are processing how much you have experienced in the past, and the memories of that can help you versus it's a whole new experience. And so your body, your brain just goes, jump into a new set. Let's just absorb and then figure it out. So in parts theory, there's this idea of a protector controller sort of thing. And in hypnosis, they sort of have a different word for it, but it's the same idea that there is a wall of logic. And if you say, I'm not going to be hypnotized, you're probably not going to be hypnotized because you're going to put so much tension into yourself. You're going to put so much concentration into it that it's going to make it more difficult to get into it. So one of the first questions I ask is, have you ever been hypnotized before? It's okay if it's yes or no, it doesn't matter. And then, okay, so this is the problem we're addressing. Do you want to get rid of it? If no, then why are you here? Trick question.
Okay. Right.
If yes, then it's up to you, because you need to relax and let us get past this controller wall that is allowing association and disassociation to happen in the brain, in the mind. And then once we get past that point, it's like walking out of a building into the open air, because that building is us. That is our conscious self. That is how we're trying to project who we are. That is trying to remember all the things that are important. But as soon as we walk into that open air, that's the subconscious mind. There aren't words in the subconscious mind. There aren't, there's nothing logical about the subconscious mind. It's the only way I could say that, because really, if we think about that, it's all emotion based. It's all how we feel. We get pictures, we get ideas, we get words. I have people tell me, well, I can't be hypnotized because I can't visualize. And people have tried this before. And I'm like, okay, do you know where your car is parked? Mine's out there. I know exactly the space that it's parked. That's visualization. Don't work hard at it. When something pops into your head, that is your subconscious mind giving you a signal for something. It can be an emotion, a feeling, a thought, a picture, a person, a place, a thing, and that has to do with your entire body. All three brains, really, if we start to think about that, are feeding you signals, but we learn to ignore it, or we think that it's just nonsense, when a lot of this is feedback mechanisms. And really what we're doing is just saying, okay, let's get past this controller, open the door, step outside into this beautiful field of thoughts and feelings and sunshine, and ask ourselves, okay, what's going on? Just tell me what you're seeing. Tell me what you're experiencing. What is that like to you? And that's usually enough for people to have an experience in session that is transformative. And I don't like dropping that word, because there's so many coaches and consultants who use it as just a throwaway marketing term. But when you step out and add your 25-year-old knowledge to 4-year-old trauma damage, that transforms the way you look at something. It changes a fundamental aspect of how you approach it. And that can release endorphins in the body. People cry all the time. A lot of people get up and immediately have to use the bathroom. Some people feel nauseous and feel like they have to spit up something. And this has a lot to do with like Bruce Lipton's and Joe Dispenza's stuff of like, look, the mind and the body, when you flush some of this stuff out, it literally is flushing it out. Your body is holding on to some of this trauma, some of these negative emotions, some of the negative thinking in the terms of like messenger RNA or proteins. When you have an emotion that's a positive or negative emotion, it releases proteins from the brain into the body to tell us how to respond to it. And if we don't process that and move all the way through it, it becomes stuck in the cells, and that kind of poisons the cells. So even if somebody says, I don't believe in it, but I want to give it a try, that's all I'm looking for, because that's the key. And once we get through that session, I'll admit, I have people that fall off. When I give them the recording, they say, I'm not going to do it, or I'll give it a try. And they come back a month later and say, it didn't work. Hypnosis doesn't work. It doesn't work. Okay. Did you listen to the recording? Yeah, like 2 or 3 times, maybe.
Right.
Okay, well, let's talk about neuroplasticity. Let's talk about neurons firing together and wiring together. Let's talk about the physical things that happen in your body to make this change permanent, because the natural state of the universe is entropy. If you don't use it, it breaks down.
Right.
So
So this leads me onto two different topics here. One question, or sorry, one, I guess, speaking of Dr. Dispenza, I heard him tell a story about how this woman came to him. She was going to be cut open completely because she had cancer so bad that they were literally the following week, she was going into surgery to have it all removed. And she was really feeling horrible about it. She didn't think she was going to make it through. She said, you know what, let me try one last thing. And she went to one of these all day events where you're basically like 5-6 hours in just sitting there with the music playing and getting that in the deep state of mind. And literally when that next week came around, well, first she felt 100 times better. And then when she went to the doctor's office, they're like, let's do one more scan. And there was no cancer in her body whatsoever. Because and basically what he goes on to explain is that we cause ourselves 90, well, maybe 100% of our ailments, our sicknesses come from us, whether it's from stress. Where does stress come from? It comes from ourselves. We're putting stress on ourselves because we're trying to control a situation that we can't control. Usually we're trying to control a situation that had already happened and there's no possible way we can change it, but yet we're holding on to it. Or this is a quote I was going to say earlier and then I forgot, but perfect now. And I can't remember it exactly. So maybe you'll remember. I think it was a Buddhist that said it, a Buddhist monk, a man that the gist is a man that worries about the future dies twice.
yeah.
He dies once in his mind and then his actual death.
Yeah.
Basically don't stop worrying about the things that you can't control. Live in the present moment because the past is gone. You're never going to change it. And the future is yet to unfold. So why live there and why project negativity and then live with this stress of I don't know what's going to happen. That's what causes our sicknesses. That's what causes cancer. And to be able to, I mean, that was just an amazing story where she was able to go into that and realize it was all her and to let it go. Like you were saying, I think she said that she ended up getting sick, vomiting it all out.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then she was cancer free. And the doctors were like, this is unbelievable. Like, what did you do?
Okay. So a couple of things about that. I love Dispenza's work because I love how it's based in science. I love case studies for everything and he measures everything. And it's one of those things because I know a lot of people that go, well, it's all woo-woo. And I grew up with woo-woo. I don't mind woo-woo as long as there's some basis behind some of the stuff. And he's adding legitimacy to it. And him and Dr. Dawson Church and Dr. Lipton all add a lot of legitimacy to it. Dispenza's retreats do something unique. They don't just get down to that theta frequency. They keep going. There's another frequency called gamma.
Right.
And gamma is a sort of, just for your listeners, it's a sort of funky frequency because we think of it as beneath theta, so it should be slower. But what actually happens is this like massive jump in brainwave activity. Like it's suddenly, you and I talked about this a little bit before, like mushrooms or DMT or some of the psychotic things. The effect of that, where all of it activates all of the brain at once, and it's just massive triggering back and forth and these waves back and forth. That's what happens with gamma, is that in true gamma, your brain is sending so many signals back and forth that it is increasing some of, well, Dispenza says it's increasing the pressure in the cranium that tends to like trigger the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, some of those things, releases DMT, and actually like triggers healing response in the body. And if you know anything about Wim Hof,
Yes.
the breathing guy, he's doing the exact same thing as Dispenza. He is using cold water and breathing to increase pressure to get to the point where he's releasing basically those chemicals, and people feel fantastic and they can withstand like freezing cold waters and those things.
And it's a form of, if I'm not mistaken, was it Kundalini yoga, which is the breathing, and it gets you into that.
Yeah, same thing, because you're in the Kundalini, you're breathing from the base chakra down in the groin, and basically breathing all the way up the spine and holding the pressure to increase all of the pressure in again the cranium. And a lot of the Kundalini stuff, you have to bend your neck down so it actually captures the breath here. As you can see, I've just read so many different books. Like, let's talk about everything. But it's triggering a lot of that response. And there's something magical about what that does, because when you connect so many of those neurons in the brain that are distinct networks, and again, talking about parts theory, when you have this instance and you're firing in your personality 1 through 3, and you're firing in your personality 5 through 8, and then maybe this one instance is 6, and then maybe you go to Starbucks and it's just that one woman that you hate, so you fire on 7 just at her, and then you walk out of there and you're like back to 5 to 10. Like all of these, I'm really simplifying that whole concept, but all of that really is saying you're creating distinct neural networks for how to approach different things. And a lot of what Dispenza and Hof and the Kundalini and so many others are out there doing is saying, look, these techniques fire this brain in this frequency that rewires stuff that's going on. It creates coherence. Where there were separate neural networks, we're now creating a network that talks to one another and can release some of the stuff that is stuck. We can release the emotions, the trauma, the stuff that is actually creating the body responses through neurochemicals, through proteins, through all of this stuff. One of the techniques I was trained in the hypnotherapy school is called command cell therapy. And it is basically sitting there going, okay, I direct, instruct, command, and something conquer. No, it's basically telling the body, with your eyes closed, what doesn't feel right? And if you had to close your eyes and say something in my body doesn't feel right, where does it not feel right? Okay, now that you can identify where it is, like maybe put your hand over that spot and start to think about it for just a moment. And then what color is that spot? And, let's go ahead and instruct the cells in that area. What would a healthy color look like? What would a healthy feel like? And now I command those cells to change into that healthy color. I command those cells to I don't know. There's one of them for cancer. There's a cancer protocol where it's like I command these cells to imagine that I'm playing asteroids and I'm the little ship and every little cancer cell is an asteroid and I am just blasting through levels like crazy, just blowing up all those asteroids until it is free and clear and everything inside my body is this beautiful golden color. It's a good example.
Yeah.
and that's really what it is it's training the mind to access a lot of the same tools as going on there to process the things, because we can, I think Dispenza wrote the placebo effect.
Yeah.
There's tons of other books and tons of other research studies out there saying, look, placebo is as effective, if not more effective than a lot of the therapies we have today, but you have to know how to do it right. And Dispenza's technique is a placebo technique. He says that up front. This is what we're doing. We think this is how it works, but your experiences may vary. Command cell therapy. There's a lot of people using it to help damaged limbs, hearing loss, eye loss. There's another guy, Chris Duncan out of Australia. I love this guy, little redhead guy with a funny accent and a quirky sense of humor. And he uses this quantum healing stuff that's like, okay, imagine Imagine you have your conscious self and your subconscious self, and that is your meat sack. Ta-da! That's your meat sack. That's where you are. But we know in quantum physics that we are more than that, that there's this field of energy around us that is sort of these electrons that aren't bound to these atoms, and it just sort of, they're randomly around us doing their things. We'll call that, maybe the soul, maybe the spirit, maybe the higher self. I like super conscious because, I'm dealing with subconscious, conscious, and super conscious. Well, if that is an energy field that is like resonating with however you are, Chris Duncan's like, I want to work with that because that seems like the thing that connects with other people, that represents all of humanity, that represents my genealogy, that represents everything that goes into me. And it's sort of like this funnel going down into who I am. He works with a super conscious and says, great. Where do you want to be? You want to have your eyes fixed? There's no reason that you can't tap into that quantum energy of what can be, right? And as a subjective experience, just go ahead and heal your eyes. And he has tons of people that are doing this.
Right.
And it's like super quick techniques. It's stuff that I'm learning that I'm like, yes, more people need this.
Right. Hey, instead, what's the alternative? Go pay $25,000 for a surgery to, that's not even guaranteed to work.
Well, and that's kind of how I feel about traditional therapy. I don't mock psychotherapy or psychiatry or any of that. I've been to counseling at several points in my life, and I think that those are very valuable. But what I have found is that subconscious reprogramming helps on a different level. When you sit there and you're talking through things with somebody else, it's great. And it comes to your mind and it's very conscious and it helps you see it, but it doesn't help you change a lot. So it's like, great, I just paid $500 for that session and another $500 for a session and another $500 for, and all I've done is discover that I didn't like my dad when I was younger. Super.
Right. And it's just something to go back before we get too far for our audience to understand really what the gamma brainwave is. So if you can go on YouTube and look up Joe Dispenza's his events. If you have no idea what you're getting into, like if you didn't know what he was doing prior to watching it, you would be freaked out, because when people get into that brainwave, you have the emotions are all over the place. You have people laughing, you have hysterically, you have people crying, you have people like screaming, and you're like, what is going on? There's a bunch of possessed people, like what's going on? So I just want to throw that out there. Like the first time I saw a video and you have all these people just doing all these different crazy things, we're like, what is going on?
Well, okay, so I know of 2 instances in my life that I've hit that frequency. I know it without a doubt. And the first time I hit that frequency, I bawled. I could not stop. But the interesting thing is that after the crying finally subsided, I had a moment that Eckhart Tolle describes in The Power of Now. And it's the moment where your brain is silent, where there is nothing going on. There's no narration. You start to see like this chain of events of this happens and then this happens and then this other thing happens. Like I hear a sound that draws my attention. That is the chain of events happening. I hear a sound that makes me think a thought that reminds me of something else that draws my attention because of a fear based in the thought. But it's all the brain working so quickly, it recognizes the chain and just stays silent. And that was the most peaceful afternoon I have ever had. It was amazing. I went out in the world. I took a walk around the block. I went to go shopping at Sprouts, and it was the most miraculous sort of feeling. And I'm like, I want to get back there. I want to do that. And the other instance, it doesn't happen every time.
So
Dispenza
that is just before you go on to the next one, that exact like what you're saying, you just bawled for like you uncontrollably, and then once you stop, there's nothing. It's just calm and silence, and just I've experienced that as well. And it's so, and so I don't know if you experienced it. Did you try to get yourself there? Did you put yourself there through meditation, or did it just happen? Because for me, it came out of nowhere. I don't know what caused it, but I just got there, and yeah.
So I did it through meditation. It was one of my regular meditation practices that just happened at that day, at that time, to hit on a series of whatevers that it just happened. And the more I've read about it since, the more I'm like, okay, sometimes it just happens. Dispenza seems to have a process that gets people there.
Right.
But I also recognized that that was not the first time in my life that I've experienced that. I experienced it as a teenager and as a younger adult, and as a kid, actually, a couple of times. So I, like, now looking back, I'm like, okay, I've done this before. It is something I am capable of. But after it happened, I'm like, holy cow, I'm going to get right back there. I want to do that again.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. Like I've that same experience has not happened again for me. And
do you think it has something to do with because you want it to happen, like
yes,
because you're
absolutely,
okay.
absolutely, which is that made me read a little bit more of Alan Watts and the Tao and Buddhism, and go, okay, stop with the desire, stop with the wanting, just enjoy the experience. A little bit of Ram Dass out there, be here now sort of thing. Like, just ride that. And the second time that I know that I hit that brainwave frequency, I laughed. I had uncontrollable laughter. And I realized that that was me processing a lot of the same type of emotions, but that were stuck in a very different kind of way. And it was probably 25 minutes of me just laughing hysterically. Like, I had tears rolling down my cheeks, but I was laughing through it. My stomach hurt so much. And when I was done with it, I didn't have the same clarity of thought, but I felt kind of high, for the lack of a better term. I just felt high, like, yeah, it's good, man. It's all good. It's all cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
So I recently had that experience. But it was chemically induced. We'll say that. So
again, when we talk about these things, when we're talking about brain chemicals and the responses, even if it's chemically induced, what we're finding, the reason that so much psilocybin research is coming to the forefront right now, and DMT research, is because those chemicals either mimic or replicate or are the same chemicals that we have in our heads. And it's the connections that they're causing, which causes us to release so much of that trauma. And then we look back at Hawaiian healing or Native American healing, and they had so much of these techniques to process this shit. And yeah, why wouldn't we do it? Why wouldn't we try to get ourselves there? It's just we have a little bit more information about how some of it works now to make it effective.
Right. So for me, this was actually the first time I've ever tried psilocybin. And there was no one was home. It was just me and my dog. And she's laying there on the floor. And some
clarity for the audience. Nobody else. Well, safe environment.
The reason I say this is because my dog thought I was crazy. So I eat it and there's nothing for a little while. I'm like, all right, whatever. Just gonna watch something on TV. I'm sitting there on the couch, and then it happened. It hit, and so I'm used to every now and then I'll have smoke some weed, and that feeling of it coming on. You're like, oh, this is okay. Now I realize I'm high.
Yeah,
it was that. And then it was like intense. And I laughed so hard, like belly laughed for 45 minutes to an hour straight over I would finally try to get myself to stop laughing. And I would look outside and see a bird fly by. And for some reason, that was hilarious to me, to the point where my dog got up and came over and was like checking on me, like, are you okay? But then again, unlike the last time when that bawling and then the feeling afterwards where there's just perfect clarity and you'll go outside. Going out in nature is the best thing to do.
Yeah.
Because you're just walking around, you feel the air on your skin, and you are, for once in your lifetime, in the present moment with nothing else affecting it. In this case, though,
By the way, I apologize for interrupting you. The best thing that I feel like anybody can do in that instance, go sit under a tree.
okay,
The energy field of a tree, like the electromagnetic field, is greater than that of a person. If you have a horse or a big animal, I would say the same thing, but that can feel kind of
yeah.
at that time. So a tree, I mean, Buddha found enlightenment under a tree. There's a reason that a lot of these stories involve sitting under trees through the last 5,000 years, because the electromagnetic fields of that, especially when you're in attunement with it, which is what you're talking about, that's something. So just
Right.
for next time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But I was just gonna say, like, after it finally broke and I stopped laughing, there was definitely not that clarity. It was kind of like, almost kind of felt worn out. Like you were like, there was a release, but at the same time, you were just like, okay, let me come back down. And then is when you kind of start thinking everything through that you just went through, and you start realizing that even though I was laughing hysterically, all the thoughts I was having in that moment were kind of just shooting all over the place. But after coming through that, and now being back in a clear state of mind, you can kind of process the thoughts you were having then and realize, oh, I get it. I understand why I was thinking this way or why I was feeling this way. It makes sense. And then if it's negative, like, oh, I was holding on to that, let me let it go. I don't need that. So it's very powerful.
And that's the thing. Like, so much of what we experience creates that emotional reaction within us, in our life. And if the emotions are captured, if the emotion is the thing that triggers memory, which is basically true, because that's what causes memory. It's binding of things, and then that whole experience creates that emotion. If you haven't processed the emotion from your experience, then it gets stored in your body somewhere. And a lot of those things, I tend not to think of the brain as so a friend of mine who does therapy, like traditional talk therapy, says that the brain is like Legos, and every memory is like you're stacking on Legos up, and you're building all these little corridors out of Legos. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's the woo-woo training in me. I think that the brain is sort of like, every time you fire a neural network, it's more like tuning into a radio channel.
That's how
And
I understand it as well.
yeah, so if all of those are individual radio channels, I've never done psilocybin, and I've been very curious, honestly, because I understand that it's basically tuning into lots of different channels all at once, and you're getting like all these crazy signals mixed together. Like, next thing you know, you're listening to Celine Dion and laughing. But I know that I've hit that just through breathing and sitting and working Kundalini style, honestly, kind of bringing up the energy and letting it do its thing. But then you also got to figure that as you're processing, as you're moving through all of that, all of these energy bonds, the proteins, the messenger RNA, mitochondria that is not working properly. This is the energy source for your cells. If your mitochondria is not working, then you're not actually creating energy enough for yourself. You're not creating ATP, which is what your cells use to actually do anything. So all of these things tend to break down when we start to store the emotions, when we start to push things down and not move through the emotion. And when you actually have something like that triggers this uniting experience, this cohesive experience in your brain, in your heart, in your body, part of the processing of everything out of you is now going through and flushing the cells, giving signals to every cell like Bruce Lipton says, you know, the outside of the cell tells the inside of the cell what to do. It's like a little computer. It's this gives a signal, and then the cell does the thing. Well, you're telling the cell, release all this crap, release it. Now is the time. This is the signal. Release it. We don't need it. So it goes through and it basically does this rapid processing of everything and kicks this junk out into the interstitial spaces in your body. Your fluids that are blood and aren't blood and sit around, and then it goes into the kidneys and the liver and it processes, or it sweats out of you. My God, the amount of sweat I have seen when they really start processing, it's just pouring off of them. And it's because the body is trying to get rid of it. But doing that also requires energy. So you are burning a ton of calories to get all of that out of you. The laughing is burning calories. The experiences within your head is burning calories. The flushing it out of your system is burning calories. And it's why a lot of times you get through with all that and you're like,
yeah, yep.
And I hate to say it, but the body's lazy. The brain is lazy. We don't like burning calories. That's what keeps us alive. But on a survival Neanderthal level, we don't want to do it because it's hard. And that might mean less survival later, but we're not in that survival state. So training our body to recognize that we're not cavemen, that we can process and get stable and clear with where we are, that's tricky.
Yeah. Well, then I'm going to say, let's wrap up here on that note, because I have several more questions for you, but I'm thinking maybe we should do a part 2 to the podcast and go
totally
even
down.
deeper. Okay. Because I was going to say, and I'm looking at the time, we're going a little bit long here. So instead of making a 4-hour podcast, we'll break it up in 2 parts. But the next topic I want to get into is, let's go, you already brought it up. Why not? Let's go full woo-woo, all these things. And I want to hear from everything that obviously you're very knowledgeable on all of this. So I want to see how far it goes for you, because I have my own personal beliefs and I just want to see where. So let's say that for the next episode.
Okay. I will tease with this. The reason that I am in branding and that I help business people and all of this is because I believe it's all tied together.
Okay.
That's my tease.
Yeah, this episode was just packed, filled with just, the way that you talk, that you can, I wish I had that to be able to just spew out this information. And thanks. We just did it on the very, it's something that I wish I could do. Like I consider myself a conversationalist, but to have that skill to where you have done your homework, you've done your research, and you have all of this knowledge stored up, the ability to take everything that's just stored in here and just come out with it.
Synthesizing information is one of my gifts.
I wish I had that gift. I really do.
I'm very grateful for it because it allows me to be successful in a lot of different areas, and that's what I want for other people. Because I don't know. I see no reason why that ability can't be programmed into the subconscious. Right.
And again, that being said, I'm not saying that I can't ever be like that. I just wish I was like that right now.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm not critiquing. I'm just,
Yeah. All right. Well then, yeah. So we'll leave this with a teaser here, saying that the next episode we're going to go really deep into even further than beyond what we talked about in this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to dive into the Mariner's Trench. Right on.
Yes. All right. Well, then, with that being said, thank you for coming on. Thank you for all of this. It was honestly an overload of information for me.
I said earlier, I think that your audience is going to end up having to look up a bunch of people. And I think that's good, because
Yeah.
that's exposure for all of these ideas and all of this stuff. And there's so much of it that's coming together right now that anybody listening, get yourself exposure to some of these people, get yourself exposure to some of these thoughts, because it can transform your life in a lot of ways.
And just to add to that, you know, someone asked me, why am I doing this podcast? Like, what is my goal? What's the long-term goal? And, you know, obviously I'm doing because I like having these conversations, but to sum it all up, I want to bring people on, guests on, to inspire people to have an open mind, to think, to really even for lack of better words, meditate on these things. You know, while you're just driving down the road, you're not really anything on your mind, and you're listening to this, ask those questions to yourself, nobody else. You don't need anyone else's justification. Just, what do you think about it? So, you know, using this as a platform to have people tune in and like, wow, I never thought about that. So this episode hit the nail right on the head.
Great. I'm glad I could help.
Yeah. All right, well then, yeah, let's wrap this one up. We will touch base for the next episode, so our audience, so they can look forward to that very
All right.
shortly.
Thanks,
All
Mike.
right. Yep. Thank you, Jeremy.